Good morning, everyone. I trust that you are all keeping well. Lovely to see you this morning. Good morning, Clarice. Good morning, Eitan, and all of those that are still joining us today. Today's learning is dedicated in memory of all those whose yahrzeit in the community falls today. And good morning, David Goldring. In particular, you'll notice, David, that I have round my neck the magical chain. I don't think you can see it, so let me put it a bit closer. So you should be able to see. So it's probably a bit upside down. If you can see, then you'll notice. And this is the theme that we're going to be speaking about today. Not Spurs, but something related to Spurs. So I'm sure it will be a very of interest to you all. So yesterday, I had the pleasure of seeing the grand tour of the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Arguably, they say, one of the greatest stadiums in the world. It was a fascinating trip, an extraordinary, impressive building. I don't know if you can call it a building. It's an empire. And one of the, when you go on the tour, you can feel the passion, the pride in the building. I have to tell you that the what was it, the facilities, the amenities for the entertaining and for the hosting were magnificent, and that's what you spend most of the time looking at. The trophy cabinet took around 2 seconds, and if you blink, you miss it. But that's a story for another day. But being that as it may, it raises an interesting question relating to this week's parsha. I don't know the exact figure, but I believe it is certainly above a billion in the football industry in this country. It is millions upon millions upon millions that is spent. It is a real and a very, very lucrative business for the football, but for many it is far more than a matter of business. It is a matter of it is their lives, it is their faith, it is their existence, and they live, eat, and breathe football. Who was it? Shankly, who famously said, "Football. Some people think that football is a matter of a faith, but it is something far more important than that," or words to that effect. And the danger is that throughout the course of humanity, we have pinned our faith in things. And sooner or later, when you pin your faith to things, be it this, the football, or to, going back to little idols or deities or pagans or whatever it was or is, sooner or later you become disappointed. You recognize, as with anything physical, its limitations, its fallacies, and therefore you become rather disillusioned and disenchanted. So let's turn our attention with that. I have to tell you, it was interesting. Just as one aside, before we go into discussing about this week's parsha, it was I was in the locker. What do you call it? The changing room. It was more like a hotel room, but the changing room for the Spurs team. And perhaps if it looked more like a changing room rather than a hotel suite, then perhaps they would actually have a football mindset. But that being that as it may, it was interesting. So when I was in there, there was one of the guides, and he made a beeline for me, and he was discussing about bar mitzvahs and about basically everything Jewish. I came for a day out, and all of a sudden I felt like I was in shul. We're discussing everything and anything under the sun. And he was speaking about, he had a fascination, it seemed, about Judaism. His wife had been a teacher in a Jewish school. It was very, very, very interesting that wherever I go, somehow, the people's Jewishness comes to the fore. I don't know if you found this. People like to drop in comments into conversation. You ever had this? Just to show you that although they're very, very far removed from Judaism, they've actually got Jewish antecedents. They're actually Jewish. They've got Jewish roots. So let's now turn our attention back to what we were discussing, and that was about, how it is that in every generation we've had our pagan practices, we've had our idols. So the first example of this is in this week's parsha, Parshas Ki Tisah, the high point, which is really a low point in Jewish history, one of the most embarrassing and unfortunate incidents was that of the golden calf. You got to imagine the scene. Imagine the backdrop. So the Jewish people had been taken out of Egypt by God in the most miraculous, wondrous way. 10 plagues, greatest empire brought to its knees, and they walk out triumphantly from there. Then the Egyptians, one desperate final attempt to hold on to some type of power and to hold on to the Jewish people. They gather their chariots and what they've got left, chase after the Jewish people to the Reed Sea, and then with no way out, all of a sudden the Jewish people triumphantly march through the sea splits, the Egyptians chase after them, and the sea comes crashing down and they're drowned. And the Jewish people are walking through and they're just seeing miracle after miracle. They've received the Torah. God spoke to them directly, and so on and so forth. Everything and anything that could happen to them happened to them. They were their receptacles for the most wondrous, miraculous events, and the most extraordinary scenes that we have ever witnessed in humanity. And the question is, with all of that, how did they come? Because to do the terrible transgression of the sin of the golden calf. Moses was at the mountain 40 days. They miscalculated. They thought he'd been up one day more than he had. They counted the first day, which wasn't a whole day. And therefore, the Satan, the evil inclination, came, persuaded them, and basically they decided to replace Moshe with another conduit. And what was that? They created a golden calf. How did they come? If we think about what God had done for them, how could they possibly exchange, the God, the benevolent God, the all-knowing God, who had performed all these miracles for them, with an inanimate, molten image? And the answer is in the question, as it always is, and that is quite simply, friends, that it was all one-sided. God was doing everything for the Jewish people. And if you sit back and you are passive and you allow everything to take place around you, if you go, and you're watching this firework display, this thunder and lightning and God speaking to the Jewish people and everything, it's all wonderful, but it doesn't necessarily lead to lasting transformation in yourself. Why? Because what you put in, you get out. And if you haven't had to work, if you haven't had to labor and to invest time and effort, sweat and toil into any type of project, then inevitably you're not invested, you're not in it to the same degree. And that is arguably what happened with the Jewish people. This is one approach. At the time of the golden calf, the Jewish people hadn't invested. They believed, but they had been passive, not active. And that is why straight after the golden calf, they're commanded to build together, to collectively contribute, to work together, to build a tabernacle, a place where God's presence would rest, would reside in this world. And that is it's a phenomenal lesson for us all, that the things that we really, really connect to are where we have invested. What you put in, you get out. And therefore, if ever we feel, be it, in our relationships, with our husbands, with our wives, our friends, our children, that, I don't feel that love. I don't feel so connected to you anymore. And very often people come in therapy and they start speaking about the other person, and they start saying all the things that the other person isn't doing or is doing wrong. And there's one thing that they fail to mention. What are you doing? Where are you in all of this? Are you still invested? Are you still giving? Are you still trying? Or have you literally walked away and given up? If what you put in, you get out. And that's a lesson time and again, also with community, also with Judaism. If we don't feel that there's we don't feel at the moment particularly connected, because the last 2 years we were at home, stuck at home with COVID restrictions, and therefore we haven't really invested. We haven't really given ourselves over to any type of religious experience, experience, then how can we expect to feel inspired? We're not there. It's so as much as things are happening around us and we live, it's extraordinary, the experiences that we have. I mean, just as an aside, one of the other, just as an out, I love to critique also when you go to other organizations and things, you know when you're walking around, let's say a place like Spurs, they think it's very cool that you have a device, and on that device you have like a show, and you watch and you listen as a virtual guide takes you around the place. The only thing that's missing is people, and what you want is that interaction with people. So if you want to connect, I think, on a much deeper level or a much more meaningful level to a club or to a building or to whatever it is, rather than having a virtual speaking machine, you need real people that you can have that interaction with. And that's why it is so important, when you feel safe, to come back to community, to engage, to contribute in some way, be it through your conversations, your presence, whatever it is, your resources, your advice. We need each and every one of you. And that is the difference between a golden calf and a tabernacle. It's the home we build together. It's what we invest. And we live in a generation, and I know we've all got, well, some of us have kids or grandchildren off school at the moment, half term they call it. Who came up with the idea of half term? I have no idea, because it's certainly not a break, not from where I'm sitting. But the whole problem with these things is kids don't want to do. They just want to sit back and they want to be entertained. And therefore we are enabling or facilitating a culture to develop or to thrive of passiveness, of non-engagement, of not making any effort. The Torah tells us clearly that the amelus, effort, is the key component to really engaging and connecting in a meaningful way with the Torah. It's not about brains, it's not about brilliance, it's about 99% perspiration, only 1% inspiration. And that's why so often we hear online, we hear these lectures, we hear these talks, or we go and hear people. We've seen people over the course of our lives that were very inspirational, but at the end of the day, what happens? It comes and it goes, because it's not internalized. So please God, we should be able to learn the lesson from Chet HaEgel, the golden calf, the lesson from Spurs, and the lesson of life, which is you are what you invest in, and what you put in. What you put in, you get out. So please God, we should all have the courage and the strength of character to be able to really, really invest in our relationships and in all areas of life. Memorial prayer. Adon Elamim Zachoes Nishmoi Shalchu Li'olamam Barachamim Sasim Sesitan Afecha Li'olamim V'titzov V'tzachais Shmasam V'yanucham Shmasam V'shalom V'namar Amen. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even as I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my adversaries. You anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. Misha Berach, Avasin Rabin, Yaakov Moshe, Aaron, David, Shlomo, Yivarech, Rabbe, Esachilim, Babo, Shanim, Ispalim, Babo, Rambis, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yimalirach, Malehem, Lach, Monokosam, Yishlach, Mimavich, Shalem, Maman, Shalom, Lechalim, Beso, Shaf, Yisrael, Pesavich, Vizikuf, Hash, Tabak, Ismakarif, and Amar, Amen. Wishing everyone well. Please God, tomorrow night, we're looking forward. Friday night, Iraqi Friday night, with Edwin and Esther Shuka as our hosts. A wonderful array and tastes of different tastes and delicacies from Iraq. We'll be journeying back to Babylon and learning about our heritage and one of the golden periods in Jewish history, the Talmud, and so on and so forth, and the Ben Ish Chai. And that's this Friday night. Looking forward to seeing everyone there if you are able to, and if not, keep safe, keep well, and please God, we'll see you tomorrow. All the very best. Take care.